Qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix is over and we have potentially a great race on our hands, as qualifying has thrown the grid order completely out of sync from what we have been used to, except from obviously the man on pole position. Yep, once again on pole position it is Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, but there are a lot of stories to tell from that session and the race might not be all Max Verstappen's way. We're going to be taking a look at the data from qualifying to see what we learned because, well, there's a lot of exciting data to analyse. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. The majority of viewers are not currently subscribed to the channel, and if you're one of those, I would greatly appreciate if you just tap that little sub button. Now, let's get to the video. As per usual, we're going to be taking a look at Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull a little bit later on, so stick around for that because there's a lot of interesting points that we can take away from this qualifying session with those cars, which might explain why we saw what we did. But firstly, we're going to be taking a look at the guys that are starting a bit further down the field, and it seems like my thoughts from yesterday's practice analysis video with regards to the Alfa Romeo were correct. Alfa Romeo this weekend, it seems, is the slowest car overall. Bottas and Joe both out in Q1, and that is a huge surprise when you think about the opening race of the year. In Bahrain, it seemed like Alfa Romeo could have the potential to be consistent point scorers, but this weekend they are the slowest car and out of Q1. This goes to show just how tight the midfield is once again, as we don't seem to have a consistent slowest car in the field. But Alfa Romeo were not only slow overall in lap time, they were slow in terms of top speed. So far this year, it has really been McLaren who's been the slowest car in a straight line, but for some reason this weekend, Alfa Romeo has been the slowest, as this graph shows. Now, whether or not this is down to them running a more draggy wing, perhaps in hope of rain, I don't really know, but it seems like they have gotten the setup completely wrong. Speaking of McLaren, let's get to them now, and well, I may have been a bit wrong. Yesterday I mentioned how great it was to see McLaren finally show some improved pace, and well, that lasted all of a few hours, since Piastri was out in Q1, and Lando Norris is P12, and was knocked out in Q2. And it seemed like Norris had to really hustle the car around the circuit in order to get some lap time out of it. I mean, just watch his lap and then watch a lap time of, say, Max Verstappen, and you can see the difference is pretty much night and day. Norris was having to use every inch of the circuit and get the car moving around the circuit in order to extract any real performance, whereas Max Verstappen and his car were at perfect harmony and he could pretty much dance around the circuit and still be fastest. For McLaren, this lack of performance is really starting to become an issue. It is looking very likely that neither Norris or Piastri will score any points tomorrow, and McLaren are staring down the barrel of leaving round 3 and heading into the April break still in P10 in the Constructors' Championship. This has been a disastrous start to the year for the team, and honestly, I don't see it getting any better for them in Baku, because, well, Baku has a very long straight. That being said, all it takes is a few incidents ahead, and maybe, just maybe, we could see a McLaren score some points. That being said, one upside for McLaren is that, for once, they were not the slowest car in a straight line, as that honour belongs to Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin. One team, or at least driver, that did impress me today in the midfield was the Williams and Alex Albon. Williams had an incredible today with Albon, as the Williams not only made it into Q3, but fairly consistently they were the fastest car in Sector 2 around Albert Park, which is really incredible. In a lot of laps they were faster than the Red Bull, which is a well-known rocket ship, but how was this possible? Well, really you just have to look at Sector 2. Sector 2 only features one real corner, and the rest of it is the run from turn 8 all the way to turn 9, and the Williams is a very low drag car, and again, it has always been like that. I was saying it last year in my Monza preview that Williams will be very strong there, and I have been saying it the last couple of races too. They lack a lot of downforce due to having a fairly basic aero package, but this aero package leads to the Williams being a very slippery car. This slippery car means that they are very fast in a straight line, even if they are lacking a little bit of performance in the corners, which worked perfectly for them today. In the race, it could be tough for them to catch the cars ahead, but if Albon gets off to a good start, then points will be very possible, as he will be difficult to overtake on track. And one of the reasons why it'll be difficult to overtake Albon is because, as we saw today, tyre wear is very, very low. Many drivers opted to do Q1 on one set of soft tyres and use the same set for most of the session. This led to drivers doing 3 or maybe even 4 push laps on the soft tyres, with each lap getting better, with also needing to do an additional warm-up lap at the beginning. This is going to make it difficult for rivals because tyre strategy is probably not going to play much of a factor in the race, and this race will be a very straightforward one-stop race. Maybe next year Pirelli could go a step softer and take the C3, C4, C5 tyres instead of the C2, C3, C4 which we have this weekend. Because as it currently stands, I kinda doubt we will see the hard tyres at all in this Grand Prix. But now, let's get to the top 4 teams, and what did we learn? Well, there's actually a lot that we learned. Firstly, let's get Perez out the way. Perez had a shocking session, ending in the gravel on his first run in qualifying, meaning that he will be starting from last place. But luckily for him, the Red Bull is so fast in a straight line that he should breeze past the majority of the competition, with only Williams and maybe Alpine being similar in straight line performance. He shouldn't really have any issues. I can still see Perez finishing in about P6 or P7 tomorrow without a safety car, and if there's a safety car at a good time, we could maybe even see Perez finish on the podium. Now, let's get to the top 4 teams, and let's start with Ferrari. From absolutely dominating this Grand Prix last year to being 4th fastest this year, Ferrari has had a huge downgrade. The team has flashes of great performances, but today it was not a good day. In Q1, it seemed like they were genuinely struggling a lot for performance. In Q2, it seemed like things were coming together nicely, but then in Q3, things all fell apart again. Sainz made a mistake on his first push lap and kinda got in Leclerc's way, and you can see how this affected Leclerc when looking at the data from their fastest laps. Things for Charles were looking good, but from that moment onwards, it moved into Sainz's favour. As the track map shows, Leclerc was faster at more sections of the circuit, but where it mattered most in Sector 2, Sainz was the faster driver, and maybe that was a consequence of what happened in Turn 3 between the two drivers, but still, for a second race in a row, it looks like that the overall faster driver in Charles Leclerc is gonna be behind his teammate Carlos Sainz in the race. For Aston Martin, I did mention that I feel like they will not be the second fastest team in qualifying, but I expected the team to beat them be Ferrari and not the Mercedes. But for Aston Martin, this was a little bit of a tricky session. Lance Stroll is starting in P6 behind Carlos Sainz, Alonso, the two Mercedes, and of course Max Verstappen. But for Alonso, he was beaten by not one, but 2 Mercedes cars today, as both Hamilton and Russell were able to get ahead of Alonso. And why is this? Well, let's look at the data from Hamilton and Alonso and compare. When you look at the telemetry, it becomes a little bit more clear, and it is the same issue that is going to plague Aston Martin a lot this year, unless they get on top of it quickly, and that is that the Aston Martin is simply lacking straight line performance. As the telemetry shows, and also the track dominance graph shows, the Aston Martin is faster through the technical corners and the slower sections, but as soon as they get on the DRS and blast down the straight, the Mercedes streaks away from Aston Martin, and there is absolutely nothing that Alonso can do about it. If Mercedes work together in the Grand Prix, then this could be the first time this year that Alonso does not finish on the podium, even if the Aston Martin is a faster race car without the DRS. And speaking of Mercedes, let's now come to them. And for Mercedes, this was the perfect qualifying session for the team. They have improved massively from what was not a perfect Friday. The car is not a Red Bull when it comes to straight line performance, but thankfully for them, they are faster than the Aston Martin, and with tyre wear being very, very low, they don't have to worry about Aston Martin's superior ability to look after tyres, so Mercedes can attack the race circuit. Overall, they're probably faster than Ferrari as well, but I really don't think we're going to see Ferrari featuring much in this race, at least at the front of the field, so I think it's a real possibility that at least one Mercedes, and maybe, just maybe, both Mercedes will be on the podium tomorrow. And finally, we come to Red Bull. And for Red Bull, I guess you could say they had a mixed session. Sergio Perez was out very quickly and will be starting the race from last place. So, we're at least going to get to look forward to seeing him come through the field and do some overtaking. But for Max Verstappen, it is yet another pole position. But I have to be honest, there was a moment when it was looking a little bit touch and go. Verstappen did not have a clean first run in Q3 and was actually down the order a little bit. But come the second run, he put a huge 0.5 seconds on the field, and really from there, we knew it was all over. But still, it was really close with George Russell getting within a quarter of a second. If Max gets a good start tomorrow, then honestly, I don't see anyone giving him too hard of a time, especially with their efficiency in a straight line. But if he doesn't get off to a good start, then we could at least see a bit of a race between the Mercedes and the Red Bull. And you never know, when things seem to happen between Mercedes and Red Bull at the front of the field, something always tends to happen between the two cars. So, with that in mind, what do I think the top 5 will be in the race? Well, for the top 5, I'm going to say that it will be Stroll in P5, Hamilton in P4, Alonso will be P3, George Russell will finish in second place, and Max Verstappen will win the Australian Grand Prix. But that is what I think. The question is though, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below, and as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.